Hello everyone, Dakoba here, and welcome back to Satisfactory. Previously, we had constructed a huge factory to produce our Phase 3 space elevator parts, and we used that factory to send off the Phase 3 space elevator and unlock Phase 4 of the game. Unfortunately, that factory took a huge toll on our power reserves, and before we can do anything with Phase 4, we need to build a new power plant, and that's going to be the emphasis of today's episode. Now we're going to start out by doing a little bit of exploring and looking for some alternate recipes and some additional hard drives so we can unlock turbofuel, which is the fuel type we'll use to power our new plant. Now turbofuel is really powerful, allowing us to get about 2.5 times the amount of power we can get out of normal fuel. But it does make for a fairly tricky build, so we'll also be looking at how we can use blueprints to make building this power plant just a little bit easier. Once that power plant is up and running, we'll look at how we can use the byproducts of those production processes in order to explore another technology tree that we've kind of been putting off for a while in Caterium. This will give us access to things like AI limiters, which we can use to build smart splitters. We'll also be constructing some high-speed connectors so that we have access to technologies such as geothermal power. Let's get into it. All right, hello everybody. Today we are going to start off by doing a little bit of exploring because I want to come down here and look at the MAM. And in the MAM, under the sulfur tree, there is compacted coal and turbofuel, and those both require hard drives. So we're going to have to head out into the world and find some hard drives if we want to explore those. Now, compacted coal, we've talked about previously when we were building a coal power plant, and it's not really worth burning for its own sake, but it is one of the components that you need to make turbofuel, and turbofuel has significantly higher energy density than normal fuel, so that is something we want to look at. Now, before we head out, I want to talk a little bit about some milestones. We're going to go ahead and unlock the Mark II pipelines here in a minute, and we're also going to be working towards bauxite refinement, although I don't know that we'll get into it today. That was originally part of my plan, but I think we just have so much to do before that really makes sense that we're going to unlock that today, but we won't get to building our aluminum factory till next time. But what we might do, if we can get enough all-clad aluminum sheets, is pick up the hover pack, because I think we'll need 100 to unlock it, and then I think 40 more, if I remember right, to get it. That'll also give us some extra inventory slots. But man, it would sure be nice if we had a hover pack to help with building and especially with decorating. Well, maybe we'll get lucky and find some while we're out exploring. See, there are a few more hard drives in the northern part of the map that I want to run around and pick up today. And those ones are fairly high level items that or require fairly high level resources. And so I want to make sure that we are carrying our highest level resources with us as we go. So we've got these 12 fused modular frames, and I went on the Satisfactory interactive map and found that there is one of the hard drives up there that requires 12 fused modular frames. There's another one that requires some electromagnetic control rods, which I thought I saw in here as well. Oh, I've already got them in my inventory there. Okay. But because these are higher end hard drives, I expect them to have some higher end resources. So let's go ahead and head out. All right, now there are a few more drop pods that I had missed up here like this one. And in order to find these, I've been using the Satisfactory interactive map. It has a really cool feature where you can upload your save game and it'll highlight which ones are still available, as well as list the requirements to retrieve those. And that's really useful because there are literally almost 100 hard drives in this game, and it is quite daunting to try and find them all by hand. There are some cool tricks you can use with the radar tower once you get that unlocked in order to make it a little bit easier. But to me, it's just a question of time budget and whether or not it is worth it to spend the dozens or hundreds of hours to find all of those drop pods. Now, in particular, because I've done it all before, how I approach it is that I usually go into an area and just spend a little while, a couple hours, running around, picking up whatever resources I can, hunting monsters, things like that. And then once I have finished, I will, when I want to make my second pass, I'll go ahead and use those tools just to make sure I'm not missing anything. and not wasting too much time. But the first time, it's fun to explore the geography, figure out, like, can I make this jump? Is it going to work? Oh, got to use my jetpack there just a little bit. And then what's up here? Are there any monsters awaiting me up in these hills here? I think yes, whole bunch of monsters. Okay. Let's go ahead and delete this this drop pod down here. And then I did identify several more up in the hills that I don't want to tangle with right now. The other thing I'll sometimes do is turn off creature hostility, because particularly these hatchers, I find more annoying than fun to hunt. Well, as these spitters, I actually quite enjoy, jetpacking or parachuting around and taking pot shots at them, especially if we can get multiple of them all jumping into the fray at once. And so this is a rather fun way for me to spend some time in the game. It's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, and sometimes I just don't feel like doing it. It doesn't seem like a fair fight, really. And similar to hunting hard drives, after many hundreds of hours of decimating the number of fauna in this world, sometimes it's nice to just either set them to passive or retaliate. So that option is there in the options under gameplay. You can simply set the fauna to passive. And I frequently, the other thing is that I'll frequently, if I'm playing around in my creative testing world, then I will have that turned to passive. And that's actually a game level setting rather than a save level setting. So even if I'm playing around with it set to passive in a different save game, when I load back into this one, it will remain passive. And then I won't notice for several hours until I realize that something that I expect to be attacking me isn't, because you don't notice things that aren't happening to you, right? Now, turning off creature hostility makes it much easier to grab things like this hard drive, which takes those fused modular frames we talked about earlier. Because these big fellas aren't a whole lot of a threat here. Oh, we've got some packaged liquid biofuel. Maybe that's something we can throw in as a side project in today's episode as well, because that's something that I've been meaning to get to for quite a long time. Now, at our last drop site, I did find some all-clad aluminum sheets, only 65, and I think, like I said, we need around 140. So that may be something that I make a point of looking for. But it would be really nice if we can find enough all-clad aluminum sheets in order to unlock that hover pack before we get into today's builds. That is something that I'm going to be actively searching out as we explore some of these locations. Now, of course, turning off creature AI doesn't remove environmental hazards from the game, so there is still a bit of danger when it comes to exploration. So in this case, we have a uranium cluster right next to a nuclear hog guarding a drop pod. And so I could sit at a distance and sort of pick off the alpha hog or the nuclear hog there, and then wait for his body to despawn before I went in to loot this hard drive. But sometimes you need some danger in your life. So let's pop on in. High-speed connectors, no big deal. We can grab that, get out of there, pick up some turbo motors on the way out. Are those? Yes, those are more all-clad aluminum sheets. Those are things we definitely want to pick up. Let's clear some inventory space. Jump in, grab those. Oh, we're up to 142. Perfect. So we will be able to use our hover pack later. That's excellent news, or we should be able to. I'm going off of memory on those numbers. Hopefully that'll serve me well. We've got one more drop pod over here, and this one takes electromagnetic control rods, if I remember right. And I don't know that we have enough, so we'll have to jump in and see. But there's a couple of nuclear hogs and a whole bunch of uranium here, so let's keep our fingers crossed. Hope that we can get what we need here. We're short. We're short by 11. Some more turbo motors. Happy to take more turbo motors. Okay. Well, that's a little bit of a bummer. So we'll actually, that's okay. Some aluminum casings there, but we'll come back for those. There's another drop pod just down there, and then there's another one over on the north coast that I've been missing. So we'll grab this one, and then we will head over for that last one up on the coast. Actually, wait a minute. Hey, we got the electromagnetic control rod, so we'll jump back up there and get that one here in a minute. All right, we're over here right next to our last hard drive, but this one is going to be guarded by these poison pillars. So let's go ahead and clear some of those out. I did have someone point out to me not long ago during a live stream that you can actually hold down the mouse button in order to determine how hard you throw your Nobelisk. That's something that had eluded me for thousands of hours playing this game, and it's made things so much easier. Before that, if I wanted to blow something up from far away without risking exposure to whatever deadly chemicals, I would have to do like a slide jump, and then you can get some pretty good momentum on them doing that, but that's quite a bit harder to aim. So I'm glad for that tip. All right, we are back here at the hub, and we can go ahead and jump into the MAM and under sulfur. I think we can go ahead and unlock compacted coal straight away, and then we'll need to craft up a little bit of compacted coal. Now, because compacted coal is an alternate recipe, it's actually going to require construction in a machine. You can't craft alternate recipes by hand. So we can go ahead and set up one of those. And if we want, we could even do something like make some smart plating and then get out a summer sloop here, chuck that in there so that we are increasing the amount we're producing. Also grab some power shards just to speed things up. And that will allow us to switch this machine over to compacted coal after the first craft is made. Summer sloops don't apply to a craft in progress when you sort of first put them in, and that includes if you've never used the machine before. That first craft isn't going to be appropriately slooped. However, now that that's done, we can go ahead and select this recipe, switch it over to the compacted coal, and throw in our sulfur and coal. And that will start producing that. And so it's taking 5 sulfur and 5 coal and producing 10 compacted coal instead of just 5. And that means that we should get the 15 we need for turbo fuel very, very quickly. We can go ahead and send that one away. Now, I wanted to do that because there's a couple of alternate recipes surrounding turbo fuel that are really valuable. And so now we've still got 4 more hard drives we can use, and they will give us the opportunity to search for those while we take a look at how we might set up our turbo fuel power plant using the compacted coal recipe. And if we find one of those recipes, then we can, modify our design or otherwise make use. There's heavy turbo fuel, which is not my favorite of the recipes, but has some really nice synergies. And then there's a turbo fuel blend, which is very, very powerful. And so those are, worth taking a look at. Let's see what our doggos have for us. Oh, some more electromagnetic control rods. That's great. Some aluminum casings and some Nobelisk. Love it. Speaking of aluminum, though, we did find enough all-clad aluminum sheets that we should have no trouble sending off our hover pack milestone here. So let's go ahead and get this one sent away and take a look at our hover pack. All right, I've loaded up the last of these resources. Let's go ahead and get our hover pack milestone sent away. That will give us a few new inventory slots, which is excellent. We can always use more inventory. And let's pop over here and see. Yes, we have what it takes. It does take 40 all-clad aluminum sheets, but we have everything else we need. Let's craft one of these up and start hovering around a little bit. Now, we're still going to be making extensive use of the jetpack. They are different pieces of equipment and serve different purposes. The hover pack notably uses power. It's going to draw power from a nearby machine, and as we hover around, you'll see blue lines sort of shooting out into the character whenever we pass in range of something like that. And that is our machine, our hover pack connecting to various machines in order to draw power. If we ever leave that range, then the hover pack will simply fail to work. So if we come somewhere where we're out of range of any machines, it's a little bit tricky to get there if you're so close to a base, then we simply fall, and eventually the hover pack shuts down altogether until we come back within range of a machine. And one of the cool things is that since we'll be working with trains, the rail lines themselves are powered, and you can build along rail lines. And so that's nice. But as long as we have power and we're close to powered structures, we can fly freely, and that is excellent. So it's not great for exploring unless we bring our power with us, but it is pretty good for working around the factory, and I'm very, very excited to make use of this. I'm glad that we were able to do it before we had to set up aluminum. That's going to be a big help in getting there. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the milestones all require a little bit more involved work or don't give quite as much benefit. So, for example, we might be able to get the 100 casings for the hazmat suit, but until we're ready to start working with nuclear in earnest, which is going to require supercomputers and a variety of other aluminum-based products, then we don't really need to worry too much about having access to those. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's pop on out to our blueprint designer and see if we can't come up with a turbofuel blueprint that will make our lives easier and let us save the day. All right, now let's go through how this works. Now we've got our first refinery here, and that's going to be producing heavy oil residue as well as a bit of polymer resin. Now for now, we're sinking that polymer resin. This is an inefficiency that we can resolve after construction, but I wanted to make the blueprint sort of set and forget. So I threw that in there, but it uses 30 megawatts of power and doesn't see a whole lot of use. So that's definitely something to address later. The heavy oil residue, though, is important. And so we take 11.25 heavy oil residue and send it through this purple pipeline over here into this refinery, where it's combined with 22.5 packaged water per minute to produce packaged fuel using the diluted packaged fuel alternate recipe. Now that packaged water is coming in on this bottom belt line over here, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the packaged fuel comes out here and goes into this packager to be unpackaged, where it sends out fuel and empty canisters, and the fuel goes into the orange pipeline. We'll come back to that. The empty canisters go along this belt line over to this packager, where they are combined with our water input line. Now, during the time lapse, this water input line was just sort of sticking out the front here. This is a modified design that we'll talk about here in a minute. So instead it draws from a pipeline up there, but it brings in the water, packages it into the packaged water that gets sent over to produce more packaged fuel. Now, the fuel output that we mentioned earlier, this orange pipeline, comes on over here and goes into our turbofuel manufacturing refinery, which takes that fuel as well as some compacted coal. Now, the compacted coal is going to be made at this assembler right here in the middle, where it takes coal and sulfur and produces the compacted coal, sends it up onto this conveyor, which snakes around right through here and then down into that refinery. As a final step, the turbofuel, of which we are producing 18.75 per minute, is sent up this pipeline, this red pipeline, all the way up here to be burned in this fuel powered generator, which, take a look, turbofuel has a burn time of 7.5 per minute. So if we overclock this to 250%, that is 18.75, precisely the amount we're producing with 3 power shards. And so that is the basic idea. Now, again, during the time lapse, we had all of our inputs come in on this side. The crude came in right there, the water came in over here, and the sulfur and coal came in right here in the middle. During a recent live stream, after I had made that time lapse, I was showing it to someone and they were like, well, could we make it more modular? And so we started playing around with the idea, and big thanks to the chat for helping with the ideas there. But we decided that if we sent this set of pipelines, this bus right here, with our water, our crude oil, our sulfur, and our coal, then what we can do, if we take this blueprint, let's see if I can find a place for it. All right, so now the big advantage of using this more modular design is that if we were to place one of these blueprints here, for example, and just say, as an example, we were to set that right there, we can then go into blueprint auto connect mode. And if we line it up just right after this one completes and all the lines are drawn on it, there we go. Then we should see, yes, those lines connect. And if we then snap this into place just so, then now, as long as we have the power hooked up at this first one over here, or the inputs hooked up at this first one over here, then those will automatically go down the line. We can stack up 10, 20, 100 of these in a row. And this belt, as long as it can provide the resources we need, will provide for all of them. And the only manual connection we need to do is connecting power between them, because power doesn't work with the auto connect mode. And that is it. And so that is the reason for that redesign, and it makes it a much better, much more tileable design. Now, I will post this blueprint, but I highly recommend, if you want to do something like this, you do it yourself. This was one of the most fun builds I've done in Satisfactory, and it is a nightmare. But I love that I was able to get it done with more or less perfectly right angles and no clipping. There's definitely not any clipping in here at all. Definitely no clipping in here at all. But building this blueprint was a blast. And so I highly recommend you take on this kind of challenge whenever you see it, because it is so much fun. And it's going to make building our next turbofuel power plant so much easier. All we need for it is some sulfur, some coal, some water, and some crude. And water is readily available. Sulfur and coal we can bring in via train lines. And so all we need to do is find some crude. So let's go ahead and take a look. I've been doing some scouting, and I think I've spotted a place just to the south over near our sort of very first coal power plant where we can get this thing built. Let's go take a look. Another cool thing about the hover pack is the impressive scouting range it gives you. So as an example, I'm scouting out some sulfur and some coal for this turbofuel plant, and also some crude oil. Let's hover up just about as high as we can get. And we are here at our coal power plant, so we know we have plenty of coal on site, including a couple of Mark 1 miners we could upgrade to Mark 2 and overclock if we wanted. But what's more than that is, now that we're airborne, we can go into camera mode and decouple our camera and take a look at our Pioneer hovering there triumphantly. I think that is definitely a pretty cool shot. We'll grab a screenshot of that. And then we can go ahead and scout out a little more, because we see some sulfur right there, not very far, just a stone's throw from this train station. So it might make sense for us to run a train line across this chasm, or possibly over by our starter base, so that we could potentially link into some of our production lines there, and then back along this cliff face, or even down into the ravine and back up here. Definitely some ideas to play with. We'll have to play around with that. But the other thing, if we can get the right angle on it up here in photo mode, like, look how far we are. I can't even see our character anymore. Where did we go? Oh, there we are. It's like playing Where's Waldo. Right there. Look how far away we can get. And the cool thing about that is that it lets us lets us get this really great shot and zoom in on other rare resources like crude oil just over there. So we're only a few hundred yards from sulfur and only a few hundred yards further to some crude, and we already have coal. So I think what we might do is send a train line that collects that sulfur and then heads on over to that crude, because that crude is also next to a huge lake, which will give us all the water we need. So that's all four of the resources we need for our turbofuel power plant. Now, this also opens up some other interesting possibilities. When we bring sulfur and coal together, that opens up the opportunity to take a look at the sulfur tree in the MAM, where we're going to be, because it'll let us make black powder, which we can actually combine with crude to get into the smokeless powder and the advanced munitions options. So that's one path we could take. But this train station is already hooked up to a caterium mine right there. So we're already bringing in caterium. So we would also have the option of taking a look at caterium as part of this build. And that might be a little bit more useful to us because there's some really cool technologies like smart splitters there that we've been just kind of been putting off, but would be really, really helpful to have. So we'll have to play around with it. But I think for now, let's go ahead and get this logistics set up and build the first part of our power plant. And then we'll take a look at how it's working. All right, and that is a turbo fuel power plant about half complete. We're about halfway through it, and I'm loving the modular blueprint design. It's making this thing so easy to build. You can see I went ahead and threw some catwalks in so we can have an easier time running around and checking the generators. But look, our power graph is stable and beautiful, and our production is way ahead of our consumption at this point. Now, this power plant right now is producing 6,250 megawatts of power, and each bank here is going to be producing 625 of that and then consuming about 130. So we're getting a little under 500 megawatts per generator bank, or per blueprint as they go. Now, this is only half of what we're providing for. We are providing 300 coal, 300 sulfur, and we only need about 180 crude to provide for this plant at that Great. So, and that will provide for 20 of these blueprints. We currently have 10. So we're going to double this here in a minute. In order to help make sure the fluids are flowing well, we're going to be looping the other half back around on the other side and coming back in. And so that will help us. Now we also need to clean up our belt work and pipe work over here just a little bit. I couldn't during the time lapse get this to line up nicely. So let's see if we can't do something better with that right now. We're going to use the Mark II pipes for this part of it. And so maybe if we move that there and move that up there, let's see, or can we, I think what we might need to do is actually extend this out right under there somehow. So if we can do that and try doing some nudging. Well, let's see, how do we want to do this? How do we want to do this? Oh, well, one thing we might be able to do here is extend it like that, and then use a stackable logistics pipeline. Should snap right to the top of that. And we can extend that pipe by just that much. And then maybe this will give us a clean, or at least cleaner. Do horizontal to vertical right there. Yes, there we go. That is beautiful. And then we can clean up all these leftover pipelines. We now have a nice clean pipe setup there. That is great. All right, well, let's go ahead and get the rest of this thing built. All right, and that is the rest of our power plant all complete. If we take a look at it, you can see that we do have quite a bit of flickering going on. But if we actually look at this flickering, not all of it is over here. These are 250 megawatt jumps and drops. When everything's running, it's stable. So I think our turbo fuel is fine, but I think we may have to head on over to our phase 3 factory in order to resolve some of these inefficiencies, because I would love to get this straightened out. But overall, this factory is working well. And that's one of the things, by looking at this power graph, there's quite a bit we can learn. So when we see that the lines are sort of at the top of the screen, that's 18,837.5 megawatts. And that is exactly what we expect. That is when every power plant is running. When it drops, based on the size of the drop, we can tell what kind of power plant has shut off. So in this case, when it drops from 837 to 212, that means it's 625 megawatts of power. That's one of our turbo fuel ones, because that's a fully overclocked fuel generator. But a little bit ago, when we were seeing drops of just 250 megawatts, that is an indication that there's an issue over at our one of our basic oil refineries, a normal fuel generator. And where we have those is at the very basic refinery, which is running 3.5 generators, and then at our computer factory, which is running 5 generators, and then at our phase 3 space elevator part factory has 2 more. So one of those or a couple of those are also flickering. It's also possible we haven't fully saturated these lines yet, although I'm quite confident on the math for this part of the factory. So I'm not too worried about this overflowing. I think it's just, if it is stumbling, it's just a question of manifolds. And actually, we may need to check on our coal supply as well, because we should be providing 300 coal and 300 sulfur. And so therefore, I would expect them to sort of run out at the same time. But we've run out of coal, not out of sulfur. So let's pop back over to the coal power plant, make sure we've updated our lines there, and then we'll head on over to our phase 3 factories and make sure that we have, in particular, sinking our plastic sorted out over there. Because that's the thing that's going to get us, is if we aren't making full use of that plastic, that will shut off some of those refineries and therefore lead to a shortage of fuel. But before that, let's jump on over here. Now, I like a genius, left my hover pack on my cameraman, so we're back to using the jetpack for now, and eventually we'll get that back or build a second one. But okay, we can hover around for a little bit. Yes, I see what happened here. So we need to be sending 300 coal up that line. We're only mining 240 and we're splitting it in half, so we're not even sending a third of what we need. Fortunately, that's a pretty easy fix. We'll do that. We will do this, and that should send... I want to make sure we're using the Mark IV belts throughout. We'll come on up here. Now, you may be thinking, won't this short our coal power plant? The answer is yes, it will, but we will deal with that too. And we can tell when we are doing our belt lines properly, if there's this stutter, then that means that there is a belt further down the line that is going too slowly. So no stutter back here. And there is a little bit of one down there. So what is that about? It's a Mark IV belt. That's a Mark IV belt. Why do we have a stutter? Right there. There we go. Nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. All right, now to correct the issue that'll cause for our coal generator, you can go ahead and upgrade this miner to Mark II, and then take a splitter, simply drop that on the line up here, and run a new conveyor belt down there. And then we want to make sure we're producing this power plant is consuming 240 coal per minute. So we need to produce at least that much. It's not a bad idea to overproduce by a little bit when it comes to your power producing structures. I would rather have the miner flicker on and off than have the power plants flicker on and off, which is a mantra for building power plants, is overproduce. If you have the option, there's nothing wrong with overproducing on your supply structures so that this sort of situation does not happen right here. But fortunately, that should clear up fairly quickly and easily. All right, now I had forgotten to hit record, but there was an issue over here with our power plants, and that was that I had disconnected this awesome sink earlier on, and that was causing the plastic from those refineries to back up and shut off our fuel producing refineries because they weren't getting enough heavy oil residue. That's been resolved, and I think our power grid should be stable now. We'll find a power pool and take a look at it, I suppose. There's no harm in that. Yes, and up to 1837.5 across the board. We do see a little bit of flickering. So right there, you can see it jump to 1844. That's the regenerative braking from trains. That's all that is. It's nothing to worry about, and it's not going to significantly affect the graph or our capacity there. So I don't need to worry too much about that. But essentially what was happening was that we were simply backing up on our circuit board production. And so what I've done is I've added this overflow splitter here, that this is still a conveyor splitter. We really need to get smart splitters unlocked. So I think that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of the episode, is taking a look at Caterium and getting those smart splitters. But essentially what this does is it allows any plastic that doesn't get consumed in earlier production lines, whether in circuit boards or directly in the computers, now has a path over into an awesome sink. And that will allow us to do that. It's also giving us a crap ton of coupons, which is great. We'll be able to get everything else from the awesome shop if we want. So with that done, our power grid is stable, and we can go, I think, head back to that turbofuel power plant and get it decorated, as well as take a look at our next production step. All right, now I was playing around back here at the starter base with some new architectural stuff. I've been seeing some of these like pure white concrete structure. Yep, that happened. Okay, I've been seeing some of these pure white concrete structures on social media, and I wanted to take my shot at them. And I'm not sure how I feel about them, to be honest. I like the really thin wafers, the 1 meter walls, but I think that that's just such a huge amount of work on a factory the size of our power plant that I may go with some variations on the style. But the idea here is fairly simple, and that's that if you go into the customizer, you can create a swatch that has a unreasonably high value for the brightness setting. If it goes above 1, you can make it ultra bright and or ultra vibrant if you use the adjust the other values. And so this allows you to get this sort of pure white concrete here that technically has the concrete lines in it, but from any kind of distance at all, you can't really see them, and you just get the sense of lightness there. And you can see that I've been playing around with some concrete structures of other ones that are either fix-it orange or bright blue as possible color variants. But that's something I may choose to do some other things with, either just use the normal paint swatches or even play around with some of the metallic structures. I quite like some of these metal finishes, if we can find the right one that looks good. So that's just something just something I've been thinking on and working on and may play around with in this build. But I think we can head on back and get this thing decorated and then take a look at Caterium. All right, and that is a factory all complete and all decorated, or mostly decorated. I haven't quite finished the back yet. As always, finishing the back is something that takes some extra time, but we'll get there. We'll get there. You know, when the time is right, when we're ready, and we will complete the structure. You'll also notice there's a little bit of Z-fighting in the roof. I couldn't see this during filming, but that's a fairly easy thing to fix. It's just going to be very time consuming because I'll have to replace each of these 4-meter walls with the 1-meter walls throughout that entire thing. And that takes care of that Z-fighting. But until then, we're just going to have some flashing lines. We'll try not to see it from this angle too often because that's something I want to do, but it will take quite a while because this is a rather large factory build here. But overall, I'm not too unhappy with the design. I think it ended up looking, especially on top, it ended up looking a lot flatter than I expected. So I think our next build is going to need to have some verticality in it to break up the space. And I haven't decided if I want to do that over here. I was playing around with putting in something there, or possibly out, you know, reaching into the forest and pushing a little closer to our starter base just there in the distance. That would also pair it nicely with this large rock that we could use as a piece in that. But regardless of where we build that tower, what we're going to be using it for is Caterium products because we have all the resources we need for it. If we step inside, we can take a look at this. Now we have one of our refineries here feeding this storage container with polymer resin. We're going to need to consume that before too long. But for now, that lets us see it. And the polymer resin is nice because we can fairly easily turn that into other resources. If we set down our refinery here, we can take a look at the residual plastic recipe. And if we take stock of all of the polymer resin we're producing throughout the factory, that will result in 37.5 plastic per minute. That's not very much, but it's enough. It's surprisingly enough for the sort of factory I'm looking to build next, because Caterium is quite an expensive resource. And I was able to modify the train line that's coming across here and plug it into this freight platform. So we do have Caterium on site now, as well as water and the polymer resin. And if we take a look in the MAM, there are a couple of recipes in the Caterium tree that we want to build. The first one is the AI limiters. Now that's normally made from quick wire and copper. And then the other one is the high-speed connector, which is made from quick wire, cable, and circuit boards. Now, circuit boards are also normally made from copper, but fortunately, we spent some time doing hard drives, and we got every single recipe that is available in the game. And how I know that is because I mentioned earlier in the episode, I was looking for the heavy turbofuel recipe, and I found it in the very last slot. There are no more recipes available. But that means we have every other recipe available to play around with. And so, for example, we got the plastic AI limiter, which allows us to make AI limiters with plastic instead of copper sheeting. We have plastic, we have Caterium, so this recipe is one we can do. If we take a look at the default recipe for the high-speed connector, that's circuit boards, cable, and quick wire. Well, we've got quick wire, that's easy enough. The circuit boards and cable are trickier. Now we do have access to iron with our train line, so we could use that to make iron wire, but we also have access to this alternate recipe, Caterium wire, which lets us make the wire out of Caterium. And so that, which we could then turn into cable. So that takes care of that for us. And last but not least, we need circuit boards. And fortunately, we have a couple of options for that. The electrode circuit board lets us make circuit boards out of just rubber and petroleum coke. So we could make rubber and use the heavy oil residue to produce the petroleum coke that we need to produce those circuit boards. However, we also have the Caterium circuit board, which would let us make circuit boards out of just plastic and quick wire. So once again, we are down to just plastic and quick wire as our only required ingredients. And we have the ability to make plastic from our polymer resin and our water. Now, I've crunched the numbers on these recipes, and we have everything we need to produce about 4 of each per minute. That's not very many. It's not going to work as a production line in part of a larger factory, but it should be enough to make sure that we have all we will ever need for building our own smart splitters, as well as for unlocking the rest of the Caterium tree in the MAM. So that is what we are going to be building today. So let's go ahead and jump on over to a blueprint designer and see if we can't come up with a blueprint for these that is modular and stackable so that we can build a tower in order to break up the dimensions on this space and also get these production lines going. So let's go ahead and start laying down some production lines. And when I'm designing a blueprint like this, that's designed to do a whole bunch of processing steps, I always like to start at the end point. So let's start with the AI limiters, because those are going to be a little bit simpler, a little bit more straightforward. And for that, we're going to need 26.25 plastic per minute. We want 4 AI limiters per minute, which is one of these at half speed. So we're going to need 14 plastic and 60 quick wire per minute. So let's go ahead and set down a refinery to see what we need to do to make that plastic. And we'll be doing residual plastic. We said we need 14 plastics, so we set that down to 14. That'll use 42 of our polymer resin, and we'll need 14 water, but that's the only processing step there. Now the quick wire might be a little trickier. We're going to need a total of 60 quick wire per minute. So let's set down a constructor and see what we can do there. And that produces 60 quick wire a minute out of 12 Caterium ingots. So let's see how many smelters do we need to make 12 Caterium ingots? Just 1. And so just like that, that is the entirety of our production chain. This is shaping up to be quite simple indeed, which is pretty good news for us. So let's go ahead and see if we can't come up with a layout for these that'll let us put it into structure here. All right, I think we've come up with a plan for the AI limiters, and it's pretty straightforward. So we're bringing in our water as well as our polymer resin on this belt line right here. Those go into our refinery to make the plastic. And then over here, we are bringing in our Caterium ore, smelting that into Caterium ingots, and then turning it into quick wire. Those then provide for the plastic AI limiters, which then go into storage and into a dimensional depot. So this is nice. The dimensional depot is a little bit of a question because that does use a Mercer sphere, which makes it a little tricky to build. So I may take that out of the blueprint. I'm not sure on that. But the other thing I want to highlight is because I know I'm going to be stacking this, I went ahead and threw a foundation. Actually, I did 2 half foundations. Let's go ahead and fix that. through a foundation down here on the corner on the floor, and then one at the top of the blueprint above it. And the reason for that is that will make this much easier to stack. And that top foundation will actually also, you know what, let's go ahead and get rid of the dimensional depot for now. But the reason for that structure in the corner is that it makes blueprints so much easier to stack. And so if I do the same, let's see, plastic AI limiter, we set that, say we want to set it, rotate it so it's facing in this direction, right? Well, now if we hover up to higher ground here, like so, you can see we've got that structure there. And now we can place the other one and go into nudge mode and line it up so that those are perfectly aligned. And we probably want to raise this one up slightly, right about there, and one tick closer. And now we have perfectly stacked these blueprints, because you can hold control and snap a blueprint to the side, but you can't hold control and snap a blueprint on top. And so that is what that structure is there for, is to make it so that I can be sure that my blueprints are perfectly stacked. All right, let's take a look at our next blueprint. All right, and here we have our high-speed connector blueprint. Now, this is an interesting one because this one is going to be producing 1 per minute, but the processing steps make a lot of stuff. So what that means is that, so our Caterium ore is going to be pretty normal. And same with the wire and the quick wire. Those are reasonable. But this assembler here, because we're using that Caterium circuit board and it makes 7 at a rate of 1 per minute, it means that this crafting time is 7 minutes long, and then it will deliver all 7 at once. So when we build this and supply the stuff and turn it on, it will be 7 minutes before the first items arrive up here. And then this will produce at 1 per minute. So it'll be like 8 minutes before the first items come into this come out of this manufacturer after we build it. So when we first turn it on, it's gonna take a little bit to ramp up. But the idea is that this, despite being quite slow, uses very few resources. So I'm going to build 3 of these all stacked up. And you can see I've got that same structure in the corner there where it will allow us to stack things up nicely. All right, and that is a Caterium factory constructed, not quite decorated yet. I think what I'm going to do is go back to the blueprint designer and actually design blueprints that will allow us to wrap this much more quickly, because this is a little bit of a pain. I also don't have another hover pack yet, and so we will want to get one of those as soon as possible. But our logistics are a little bit of a mess, but they are functioning, they're working, and we are getting the resources. They're all flowing into some storages there. So we're getting our AI limiters and our high-speed connectors, and those are all sort of flowing together and getting placed into the dimensional depot. So we should, in fairly short order, be able to get the unlocks that are tied to those and be able to make use of them. And to that end, I actually had stopped filming mistakenly, but did go ahead and pick up smart splitters, and we have placed our first smart splitter down here. Now, this is a smart splitter that will allow us to overflow on polymer resin. So this essentially allows us to get rid of all of those awesome sinks that were in each of the build and instead only use one. Because what's happening is the polymer resin comes down here and flows into the smart splitter, which is set to allow polymer resin to travel forward through the central output. Now, anything that doesn't fit through that output, whether that is polymer resin or any other resource, we want to go through the overflow output, which is set to the left output, and that gets sunk. So this should allow these factories, these power plants, to run forever while providing all of the polymer resin our factory is going to need in order to keep on producing. And so that is where we are at. Now, decorating this factory is something I'm going to save for another day, but we will come back and take a look at that. For now, though, I want to head on back to the hub and take a look at bauxite. Now, I don't think we're going to be building a factory today, but I do want to see what it'll take to unlock bauxite and aluminum, and then what awaits us once we have it, because that can help us make a plan for where we want to go next time and what we want to build. bauxite refinement. So that'll give us the ability to scan for bauxite as well as quartz, and it will give us the all-clad aluminum sheet as well as the aluminum casing. The all-clad aluminum sheet is the Mark V conveyor belt material, so that'll be great. And then with the aluminum casing, we'll be able to get the hazmat suit. We can start taking a look at nuclear. And then with both of them, we'll be able to build the blender and start looking at batteries and several other advanced components, including our next space elevator parts. Now that's all great. Tier 7 is a huge tier, but it's only scratching the surface compared to Tier 8 and Tier 9. So Tier 8 has the drones, which will require batteries as well as radio control units, nuclear power, which is going to take everything, and then advanced aluminum production, which is probably the biggest beast with these fused modular frames. But ultimately, those are going to be necessary for us to get our thermal propulsion rockets and nuclear pastas, and will get us closer to making the minor Mark III, which is the sort of last, the last thing in resource gathering and production. So that is definitely going to be a goal for the next couple of episodes. But for today, I think we will finish up by sending off our bauxite refinement milestone, and then we can use that at the beginning of our next episode to do some scanning for some resources, maybe go hard drive hunting to get some useful alternates. And from there, we will see what awaits us next. But I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. I'd like to thank you guys for spending a few minutes with me here in the world of Satisfactory. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode, and I hope that it has made your day just a little bit better. Leave a like if it has, and subscribe if you would like to see more. My name is Dakoba, and I hope you have an efficient day. I will see you soon.